my name is Jen and I'm the Upcycling Alchemist. Today we are going to take a look at two projects that we're doing in a collaboration with some of my friends from the Creative Network. So please check out the playlist in the description below to see what the other creatives in this collaboration did. So everybody is doing some spring into DIY projects. Alright, let's get started with our first project. So for my first project, Cindy from CnC DIY Factory has made these frames that are actually in two pieces. So the back comes out like this and it makes it a lot easier to use your decoupage paper. And I'm also going to use this beautiful blue heron painting from Connie Lines and Designs that came in Sonnet's Maker's Box for March. And I just absolutely love it. I think it's the most beautiful paper ever, and I already ordered more, but it is exclusive to the Maker's Box. So if that is something that you're interested in, you would need to subscribe to the Maker's Box. Now, I will link both CnC's DIY Factory as well as the link to Sonnet's Maker's Box for the frame, and then you can look at subscribing or getting on the wait list for Sonnet's box. So now with the actual frame, I'm taking this sample of Water Lily DIY paint that came in the March box as well. So this color was put in the March box to correlate, it all works, with the paint colors that are in the heron picture, which is called Guardian of the Marshland, Marshland Guardian, one of those two. And it's just an absolutely beautiful, like, periwinkle color. So I'm painting the frame this, but I'm not going to just have it that solid color. So in a little bit, you'll see what we do to the frame. So I'm giving it a base coat here, and this is DIY paint, which is a clay-based paint. And it is reactivated by water, so it will need to be sealed. But it has a beautiful coverage. The clay inside the paint just gives it a beautiful coverage. I'm also painting the back of the inside part of the frame so that when you look at the back, it looks complete. And I'm spraying this with water too, because that helps also to spread the paint out because it is so pigmented and thick. And I didn't need like a super thick coverage here. And it also helps the paint last a little bit longer. So on the other side, you notice that I painted the other side white. And the reason for that is because when you decoupage rice paper or decoupage paper or napkins, they get a little bit see-through when they get wet, especially napkins, they get really see-through. But even this rice paper that I'm using, which is thicker, it's still going to get see-through. So if you have a darker color behind a decoupage paper, it's going to kind of make it look dull, whereas if you put a nice white background behind it, it's going to make the colors nice and bright. So now I'm taking the trimmings. I think this is trimmings 1, maybe trimmings 3. I don't know. Don't quote me on this. I'll put it in the comments below when I look it up at home. But I'm taking the smaller of the trimming on this. This is an Iron Orchids design mold, and I'm going to make, I think, about 7 of these smaller molds, smaller trims, to go around the frame. So I'm just pushing my clay in, making sure it gets all the way into the details of that mold, and I'm scraping off the extra. I use my fingers to scrape against that micro rim edge on these molds, and then I used this little Starbucks card in the shape of a bunny because it was so cute I had to grab it to make sure that the back of the mold is nice and flat. So since I'm making 7 of these, I'm not going to show you the process is very repetitive, so you don't need to see me making 7 of them. It's the same process. So now I'm arranging these to go around the mold, and around the frame, and you'll notice that I'm overlapping the edge, the corners, because I'm going to what's called miter the edge of the corners. So I'm going to be kind of overlapping them and then cutting them with a palette knife so that they have that angled cut. So we'll see that shortly. And I will be using the Titebond Quick and Thick, which you'll see in a moment, to glue these molds onto the frame. So there I am mitering. So I'm just cutting at a 45-degree angle and then pulling the extra bits away from the frame and saving those, putting them back in my bag And this is air dry clay, so it does dry out, so I keep it in a Ziploc bag, and I like to also put a baby wipe in the bag to help it stay even more, keep it from getting dried out. So now I'm using my finger to spread that Tight Bond Quick and Thick glue all the way over to the edges of the mold. This gives you a nice even coat, so you have less chance of the glue seeping out over the edges, and you just want a thin coat. This glue is it's a really good glue, and it will bond really well with just a thin coat. And this will also dry clear the glue. So now I'm taking my Water Lily DIY color, and I'm painting over those molds while they're still wet, while the air dry clay is still wet. This can sometimes help with cracking as it dries because it kind of seals the outer layer over a bit. And I'm using a very soft bristled brush so that I don't push my clay in at all and I don't lose any of those details. So, oh, I bumped my phone. I do that sometimes. So I'm a very, very soft bristled brush and kind of pushing it in very lightly into those details. So while that's drying, I'm going to take my decoupage paper here and put it on the white side, and I'm kind of laying it out to see where it's going to best fit. And I am taking liquid patina, which is a DIY product as well, to use as my decoupage medium. And I'm putting a little strip on the bottom there once I have my paper laid out where I want, to kind of anchor that down so it doesn't slip and get laid down wrong. And I'm also spritzing the paper with water, and this helps to stretch the paper out, because if you notice, when you use decoupage, when paper gets wet, it stretches, right? Which is why when a book gets wet, it gets all wrinkled and messed up. So if you wet the decoupage paper just ever so slightly, it helps to stretch those fibers out, and it will prevent wrinkles. Especially with this rice paper, you're not really ever going to get wrinkles unless you do it on purpose. So once that is dry, this is my absolute favorite part of decoupaging. It is the most satisfying thing. So I'm using a 220 grit sandpaper to sand off the edges of this paper, and this gives you a nice clean edge. So your decoupage paper is going all the way to the edge and doesn't have any messy ends hanging over a paper. And it's just so satisfying to get that really clean edge, especially if you're using something with a shape, like I've done some bunnies and things like that, and you sand off the edges of the paper around those shapes, and it's just, oh, it's so satisfying. I mean, you got to take your kicks when you can get them, right? Am I right? A little bit of cleaning up here. Pretty sure 50% of grafting is cleaning up. So now I'm going to look at how this picture looks inside the frame with that water lily color, but I already knew I wanted to have more dimension and more color on this frame. So I am taking the other color that came in this box, which is called Cake Batter, which is a lovely kind of warm yellow, and I'm dry brushing it onto those molds to pull out that detail. However, I realized that it was kind of muddy dry brushing over the blue without a little bit of white behind it. So instead I stopped with the yellow, and I got some white out, and I'm just lightly dry brushing white over those molds, and this will help that Cake Batter yellow color to really kind of pop out from the blue. So dry brushing is a technique where you get just a little bit of paint on your brush, and then you wipe a bunch of it off, and your brush is super dry, and you're only getting a little bit of paint on there, and it's kind of lightly rubbing over those 3D details, which helps to show all of that dimension on the molds. So I am also going to have to seal all of this because DIY paint is clay-based and it does get reactivated with water. So the next step will be to take a clear coat and seal everything in. And for all of these steps, I'm still using a very soft bristled brush to make sure that I am not pushing down any of the detail in those molds, because I did this all in one sitting. I did not wait for those molds to dry. I did not do this the next day. It's all done at the same time. So I am liking the way this looks, but I think it needs a little bit something else. So after I finish clear coating everything, I am going to use some antique wax. Now, bear in mind, what you're about to see may be shocking, and it's gonna be okay. Okay, so I'm taking this antiquing wax and I'm putting it all over these molds, and yes, it looks horrible. You're probably watching this going, oh my God, what is she doing to this? She took all that time to make this beautiful and she's just making it all, mudding it all up. It looks terrible. Oh my gosh. And yeah, it did look terrible, but I also knew I was going to be wiping most of that back. And by most of it, I mean almost all of it. So I'm taking a baby wipe and I'm pulling a lot of this back. And I also decided I wanted to pull even more back. So I'm using my spray bottle and spraying water onto it, and that helps to make the wax that is on the frame run. And that's actually the first time I've ever done this technique. I'm sure other people do this, but I didn't even know. I just kind of tried it and it worked out. It also made a huge mess, which is why I keep wiping up my glass craft mat there, because it's just water and wax everywhere. So I also put the antiquing wax on the frame, but then I pulled most of it back with a baby wipe. So I'm liking the way this looks, but I also went through back onto this paper and I used my rag that already had the antiquing wax on it just to give a little bit of a halo to that paper, and a little cleanup in here, and I am really liking the way this looks. So what do you think? This project is done. Project number 2. So this next project is going to be very much a multimedia, mixed media project. Multimedia is a tech thing. A mixed media project where I'm taking decoupage paper, an old sign that I painted over white, resin, paint, and all kinds of stuff to make a 3-dimensional art piece for spring. So this paper is another Connie Lines and Designs rice paper that came in Sonnet's Maker's Box. And this came in the February box, and it's really cute spring colors. The sign says Summer Cottage. So I'm taking a small paintbrush and I just have some water on my table there, and I am wetting the edges so I can pull this edge off and have a natural sort of fibery edge. And when I decoupage this down, it's going to give it a more natural look than just putting a flat piece of paper down with straight edges, which kind of is like, oh cool, you glued a piece of paper on this board. But when you give it this natural fibery edge, it looks a little bit better. So I have this mold from Redesigned by Prima that I ordered from Reclaimed Ranch, from Tara at Reclaimed Ranch, and I will link that below as well. And this is, I think, called Springtime Bunnies, and it's got these super cute little bunny family on it, and some Easter eggs and some flowers. So right now I'm just making sure that I have this paper nice and centered. I had pulled that mold out so that I could figure out the placement I wanted, so when I put the bunnies on the bottom, that the bunnies will have the kind of room that I want. I knew it wasn't going to be centered on top. So I'm using my liquid patina to decoupage this rice paper down. I am anchoring it on that one edge and then coming through and doing sections at a time. Again, I'm spraying my paper to make sure those fibers stretch out and I don't get any wrinkles. And I'm very lightly rubbing my fingertips over the paper to smooth it down. And once I get it all down, I'm going to go back over the entire thing with liquid patina to get it all sealed in. Notice that I'm also putting the liquid patina on the white part, and that's because I want the sheen to be the same across the entire project. And liquid patina does have kind of a little more than a satiny sheen, so I wanted it to be even. Okay, so now I am taking Amazing Casting Resin, which is a 2-part resin where you mix equal parts of A and B, and I actually have them in these little squirt bottles because I have the big gallons and I don't want to mess with those gallons every time. So it sets up in about 10 minutes, but you only have about 2 minutes to work with it. So you stir it until it becomes transparent, and then you pour it into your molds. And this is the part where I always make a mess, because I always pour it and then it spreads out and then I get over the edge and it's just a hot mess. Now these ones aren't going to be as bad as the next set of castings that I'm going to show you, where I just made a huge mess and it was a nightmare. Not a nightmare, it just made a lot more work for me to clean up the edges. So I'm also, in addition to Springtime Bunnies, I also have the mold I think it's called Easter Wreaths. And this has some cute little wreaths, some more eggs, and some smaller bunnies. And I am not going to use the small rabbits or the wreaths in this project, but I did want to make the casting since I was already in the process of casting with the resin anyway. So you'll notice that I'm using my black gloves. It's not because I you know, and up to no good. It's because you want to avoid getting the resin on your skin. Some people have really severe allergic reactions to resin. I haven't noticed that for myself, but it is just not good to get on your skin. It does have some chemicals that are probably not good for you. It's fine to work with in enclosed, you know, indoors or whatever. It doesn't put off chemicals in the air, but I know some people do wear masks, especially if they're sensitive to it. So I always recommend wearing gloves. And then I also took out the IOD mold called, what is this called? It starts with a P. I want to say primitive something. Anyway, okay, so once my castings have been finished, cleaned up, and are solid, I'm kind of figuring out where I want to lay them out. I had this little bird and heart from is it primitive? I think it's primitive. Provincial? I think it's primitive. Anyway, so those are trying to figure out where everything's going to go. Then I decided I needed more on the top half, so more dimension. So again, I took out my resin, mixed some up, and I'm pouring it into the mold from IOD that was just released in the spring release that is called Blossom. And it has these beautiful cherry blossoms and branches. I also have another redesign by Primo one, and I don't remember the name of it, but I'll put it in the description. I'll have to look it up. But this is where I made a big mess. So you'll notice that there is a cup of solid resin already just above that blue mold. And that's because I was trying to fill in all these little detailed ones first, which was my first mistake, because once the resin starts to solidify, you can't pour it anymore. It becomes like a giant booger or something. But then what happened was, when I was pouring these resins, the castings, please do as I say, not as I do. Pour slowly, make small batches, get the cups that have the spouts. I was just using plastic cups that pour faster, but if I was using a cup that had the spout, I would have had much less mess. I had resin everywhere. So to fix this, when you pull it up after 10 minutes, it's still pretty soft, and so a lot of the softer edges, the thinner edges, you can just pull off with your fingers. But you'll notice I have my craft knife out because I had to go through and cut off a lot of extra resin that had spilled over, and it was a mess. But it came out okay. It just took a lot more work and clean up because I made a mess. All right, so now I'm working with the springtime bunnies, the sunflowers, and placing everything, trying to figure out where I want everything placed. I'm using these blossom castings, cherry blossoms, trying to figure out how I want everything to be laid out so that I can have an image in my mind of how everything's gonna sit before I start to paint my castings. So I did have a lot of castings for this project, so it was very time consuming, but it was also really relaxing. Once I had everything figured out, I just took out my paints and I painted and I watched TV. I had YouTube in the background, or I had Netflix in the background, and I just painted. I just painted my little heart's content, and it was very relaxing and enjoyable. But first, we gotta figure out where everything goes. There is a lot of little pieces here, so it did take me a hot second to lay everything out. Okay, so now I'm painting. I'm taking Waverly in Truffle for the branches and painting all the branches. Now, I'm not gonna show you painting every single little piece because this video would be 3 hours long, which is actually how long it was when I first put it into my editing software, and I was like, ooh, we're gonna cut out a lot of things. Like I said, this was a long process. This project took a long time, but it was really fun to do, and I'm very pleased with how it came out. So I did cut out a lot of me painting the little castings because you only need to see so much of that. I also later went over it with a lighter brown, doing a dry brushing technique to pull out some of that dimension as well. And then I'm going to come in with this green DIY paint for all of the greenery parts. And so the sunflowers and some of the cherry blossoms have green leaves, and some of this wildflower castings also have some greenery. I don't remember what the name of this is the name of the color, but I will try to look it up and put it in the description. I also will say that once all of these little items were painted, I did go through and seal them all with a clear coat. This chalk paint and all the clay-based paint does require sealer in order to stay on. All right, so now let's take a look at these cherry blossoms. I have this light pink Waverly chalk paint in Ballet Slipper, and I went through and I painted all of the cherry blossoms and the little buds with the light pink, and there was a lot of them, so it took a minute. And again, I was just watching TV, having a little, it was very relaxing. It took a long time, but it was very relaxing and enjoyable. So I'm just doing my thing, getting all the paint on there. Doo-dee-doo-dee-doo. And for the sunflowers, I am using the DIY paint in cake batter. That also was the color, one of the colors that came in Sonnet's Maker's Box for March. And it's a really pretty, like, kind of warm yellow. I really like this color. And again, this is chalk paint, so it will, I'm sorry, this is clay paint, so it will need to be sealed. I'm also getting those little buds for the sunflowers. I didn't record it, but I also did come in with, I believe it was hazelnut Waverly chalk paint to give the center of the sunflowers a little bit of a light brown color. All right, now while that first coat of colors are drying, I'm going to work on my sweet little bunny family. And so I was putting this Ballet Slippers pink in their ears, and I liked the way it looked, but I thought, you know, maybe I could make this a little bit more muted. So I'll show you in a few seconds here. I was using Waverly chalk paint in plaster for the bunnies because I wanted them to be white, but not like stark white or like the resin white. So the plaster is a little bit of a warmer white. It's not quite a cream, but it's a little warmer white. So I painted all of their little fur parts, their hands and their feet and their faces and the outer parts of their ears in this plaster color. And then what I decided to do was kind of come in and do a bit of a blending technique on the inside of the ears to make that pink color kind of a little bit more muted, and it actually turned out pretty well. So that's what you see me doing here. The Ballet Slipper pink is still wet, so when I come in with the plaster and I kind of blend it together, that pink and plaster mix up and it comes out with these little muted ears. Okay, so coming back to my cherry blossoms, I had let the Ballet Slipper pink dry, and now to give the cherry blossoms that sort of dimension that they have in nature, I took this pink acrylic paint, it's kind of a magenta hot pink color, and I watered it down to make kind of a paint wash, and I'm coming in with a small artist brush and just kind of spreading that watered down paint on the center parts of these cherry blossoms and the tips of the buds. And this allows for the darker pink to kind of wash over the light pink without saturating it. So you still see the light pink through the dark pink, and it kind of just tints it. And it helps to also bring out some of the details in those flowers. And then to kind of, once the dark pink wash had dried, I came back in with the Ballet pink to go around the edges of the flowers and mute that dark pink a little bit and give them more of that kind of dark center, light outer edge look. And coming back to our little bunny family, I am now going to paint the outfits. So for the mama here, I decided to go with purple as the main like underpart of the dress that she's wearing, and I wanted to stick with like pastel spring colors. Wasn't really like super Easter themed, but it does kind of have that Easter feel, even though I was going for spring. And the decoupage paper does say summer cottage, so I wanted it to be both seasons. So this is Waverly chalk paint in lavender. And now I am putting the bunnies up against where they're going to go on the picture, because I want to make sure that the colors I'm choosing don't blend too much in with the background. So I didn't want to put like the little girl in pink if she was going to be standing in front of a bunch of pink flowers. But where she was going to stand, it was okay to use pink, so I'm using ballet slippers again to get the undercoat part of her dress. And then I'm going to come in with some other colors for the little aprons and all that stuff. And then so for Daddy Bunny here, I am using DIY paint in mint chip for his shirt. And again, checking to make sure the colors are going to coordinate. I wanted to see that the brown was going to look okay against the rest of the picture. And so he's getting some brown pants with DIY in, oh, what's this called? I use it all the time. It's called, wait for it, Prairie Gray. So it's Prairie Gray, but it's really a brown color. And then for his jacket, I used Fusion paint, and I don't remember the name of this color. It came in the February Makers box, so I will put that name in the description below. But it's a beautiful, like, navy colored blue. And for the apron on the Mama Bunny, I'm using Fusion mineral paint in, I think it's called Buttercream. This came in this February Makers box. It was very spring themed, so all of the colors were beautiful. And I'm using a fine detail brush to get some of those areas that are around the arms and require that detail. And then for the little girl bunny, I decided to give her kind of a teal aqua outer skirt. I'm trying to find colors that coordinate but also have enough of a contrast with each other that the outfits will be colorful but still look like they were supposed to be colorful. Like, you know, they didn't get dressed in the dark that day. And then I came in, and these bunnies had their eyes were like almost perfectly shaped in the mold. So I came in with the letterpress gray, and or was it, no, was it letterpress gray or was it the Waverly truffle? I think it was a letterpress gray, and gave them the brown background of the eyes. And then I came in with a black chalk paint and did the like pupils of their eyes, which I don't know if I have that on camera. So now I'm coming in with some of the details. I gave Daddy, his bunny, his little bow, a light blue color, and the little girl bunny is getting a purple tie. I also wanted to have the colors coordinate with each other. So like Mama has a purple dress and little girl has a purple bow, and just make sure they all kind of looked like they were a family. So now I am working on gluing all of my pieces down. So what you don't see is that before this I had made a mistake, and I just wanted to make the video short. Otherwise I would have shown the mistake, but I had glued the bunnies down first. But what that meant was that my flowers didn't fit right, and so I pulled the bunnies up. The glue had not set yet, and I wiped the glue off of the board, and then I started from one end so I could work my way across to make sure that everything was going to fit properly. So now I'm putting glue back on Daddy Bunny and gluing all of them down. So I'm using a stiff brush to wipe off any glue that oozed out from behind these castings, and putting little girl bunny down. For some reason I felt like she had to stand next to Daddy Bunny, and I didn't want all the bunnies together, so I put them a little bit of distance with some flowers between the Mama Bunny and the little girl. So I have my sunflowers and my wildflowers, and I'm just making sure everything's going to fit properly and then get them all glued down. So I'll stop talking for a hot second and let you just watch the process. And same thing here with the cherry blossoms, taking my Typon Quick and Thick and just putting them all down in the layout that I had arranged. And we're almost done here. Sorry, I bumped my camera again. I do that. Kind of in my way. It's like maybe 2 feet above my workspace. So especially if I'm using a long-handled paintbrush, I bump it all the time. I gotta work on it. Oh, sorry, I did it again. Hey, did everybody feel seasick yet? Sorry. Okay, we are almost done gluing everything down here. Just a couple more pieces and then this project will be done. Now, I did think about painting the white part of the board to kind of blend in with that sky in the background, but I decided not to and just to keep it white. Not for simplicity's sake, but just to kind of maybe, I don't know what my motivation was, to be honest, but maybe in my head it helped with maybe accentuating the idea of mixed media. I don't know. In my head, it made sense. I honestly don't remember my motivation behind it, but it was on purpose to keep it white. Okay, so all of my flowers and bunnies are glued down now, and I'm going to work on this little bird and heart from the, I keep forgetting the name of it, but the IOD mold that I talked about earlier. So I wanted this bird to not blend in with the roof. I decided it was going to go on the roof above the little steeple there, or what is that called? Where the 2 points of the roof meet. It's going to come to me probably at like 9:30 tonight. But I also didn't want it to be like too crazy of a color. So I knew I wanted the heart to be yellow because it was going to go on the door, kind of on top of that little window in the door. But I did struggle with the color of the bird, and so I did purple, and then I did a whitewash of a light blue. Still wasn't what I was looking for. Then I tried this yellow blend. Oh, I also tried the like mint green dry brush, and that didn't really like that, so it was a whole process. But I finally got it to a color that I liked, that coordinated but didn't blend in, and now it's out of picture. Sorry, there it goes. I'm sideways now. So, and this project is now done. So here is the final product. Zooming in, looking at all the different parts there. I really thought that little heart on the door was a cute touch. And there is my bunny family in their garden of sunflowers under the cherry blossom trees in front of their adorable summer cottage. And I just think it's such a cute, fun little project. So thank you for watching this. Please let me know what your favorite project was. And don't forget to go check out the other creators in the playlist below. And thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already subscribed to my channel, I would super appreciate it if you go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It really is helping my channel grow, as well as all of your likes and comments. So thank you so much, and keep making some magic.